My guest today has written a cracker of a book, and it's here. It's called Connecting with Clients for Stronger, More Rewarding, and Longer Lasting Relationships. Welcome, Paul Cowan. Hello, Paul.
Hello, and thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, delighted. And you're in one of my favorite places of the UK. Go on, tell us.
Well, I'm in the Isle of Wight, which is, for those people not in the UK, it's a small island south of the mainland. And we like to think about everybody which you think of as being in the UK as the North Island. We're about a mile and a half south, and it's very quiet here. Well, it is today anyway.
Yeah, it's such a lovely place, except it gets a bit busy when there's the round the island yacht race and things like that, isn't it?
Absolutely, and Cows Week and all that kind of thing. We're a bit like sort of Cape Cod for the UK, and with all that brings, both positive and negative. But it's great here, and it's a great place. At this time, we're recording just coming out of lockdown in the UK. And it's a very nice place to be. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy that we can meet in this particular way.
Yeah, well, it is an auspicious day today. As we're recording this, everybody, it's Monday, April the 12th, and it's the day when the first sort of lockdown is eased in the UK, and you can go back to the pubs, albeit outside into beer gardens. But I thought that maybe Paul and I might be a bit silly doing that outside. You never know. It could be a long interview. We might drink too much, right, Paul?
Well, we might just have a few beers, I think, together. And that's really not what this is about. What this is about is looking at client relationships.
Yes, I understand.
Although it would be a very enjoyable occasion.
Yeah,
I'm sure this one will
actually,
be anyway.
It is interesting because, as you quite rightly say, it's about building relationships, and sometimes those relationships are built around a glass of wine or a pub. I'll be chatting to Paul in three parts. First, I'll ask him why relationships go sour so quickly. And in part two, I'll ask him what mistakes agencies make on trying to solve the relationship problem. And in part three, I'll ask him what agencies should be doing about minimizing the risk of a future relationship breakdown. But Paul, before we get started on my three parts, can you tell us briefly who Paul Cowan is, and what led you to write this great book, and what he can do for the reader?
Thank you, I will. So, very brief background. I found myself flunking out of school and finding my way into advertising. And after many years of working in international agencies, I formed my own agency. And something really fascinating happened then. After about 7 years, we were planning to merge with another company. And we had some discussions which led us to believe we had the same philosophy, same beliefs, use the same language about the things we wanted to achieve, the kind of work we wanted to do. Now, the fascinating thing was, on the first day of the physical merger, something told me it was wrong, because what they said when they described breaking out of the box or being highly innovative was not what we understood. So I really got, for the first time, an insight in two groups of people in the same profession that use the same words but mean something different. How fascinating was that?
Yeah.
And that totally led me to think about, well, what happened between our clients and ourselves? And what really sort of struck me was that what was happening was that whole groups of high functioning people, when I say high functioning, people that can hold down relationships and jobs, these people, my people, the client's people, were somehow colluding to make the worst of each other, or at the very least, not make the best of each other on a Monday morning at 9:30. What was that about? And then how was it that one of my account teams working for a client would go through hell and be delighted to do that, work weekends, nights, whatever it took, but they couldn't bothered to get off their bar stools for another client.
Right.
And that just opened the door to me thinking, wow, I've been studying what changes people in terms of messaging and how we can engage them in brands. But now I was really interested in people. And that led to me to take a master's degree in organizational change and became a change agent, and a master's degree in psychotherapy and work with couples. And in turn, that led me on to the development of a company that specialized in client agency relationships and business to business relationships, the client relationship consultancy and the customer relationship consultancy, which operate globally, by the way.
Yeah.
One of my clients said, you should write a book. That was
Right.
many years ago. You must write a book. And my business partner said, you've got to write a book. And it's taken a good few years and 3 rewrites to get to the point where it's a chatty, engaging, dip in, dip out kind of book that you could read on an airliner or on the train or on the bus or anytime you happen to have an opportunity. And really, it's a summation of everything I know. And why did I write it? Well, you know, I wish I'd known back when I started, when I first entered advertising as a messenger. Okay, this is important. This is what you need to know in order to succeed. I found out by making mistakes. And then I found out through the study of psychology and interpersonal dynamics and team dynamics, a hell of a lot more. And I thought, this is for my younger self and all those other people that are out there in service businesses, from the first day graduate to the global CEO. There's something in here for everybody, and that is it. That's the beginning and end of it.
There is definitely something in for everybody in there, but I promise me, I could keep talking to you about this book for the rest of the year almost. Let's start our talk though in part 1.
Okay.
A simple but perhaps complex question. Why do agency-client relationships go sour so quickly? Who's usually at fault? Is it too much expectation by the client as a result of the pitch? Or is it over-promising and under-delivery by the agency? Is there some arrogance around? Has the pandemic made it worse because of lack of face-to-face meetings to sort out problems? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think in all professional services businesses, and I don't care whether it's an advertising, PR, marketing services agency, or any professional services supplier, like accountancy practice, lawyers, anything, there are always 2 problems. There's at the top, there's problem A, up here, the task at hand, the strategy, the budget, the delivery, the transaction, whatever it is. And that's where everybody spends 99.9% of their time. On that. But that's what we do. That's why we get hired, isn't it? But there's something that's underneath, which is down here at this level. This is problem B. And that's, how are we getting on together? And now any client's experience of an agency, of his or her supplier or advisor, that experience of problem A, the task at hand, is always mediated by problem B. In other words, how do I feel about you? Do I really trust you? Do I really believe in what you're saying? Do I have confidence that you have my back? Are you really doing your best for me? And so if you want to express this as, well, what's the problem? The problem is that with recessionary forces, the change that's taken place in technology and the way we do business is that gradually the amount of time that we have available for problem B has diminished. So the relational nature of what goes on has also diminished. And that makes relationships more transactional. Well, if they're more transactional, it means that they can come and go much more quickly. And so the real issue is, how do we spend more time and more energy and be much better at problem B? Because if you can improve problem B by just 1%, it's going to have a fantastic impact on the bottom line.
Yeah,
so that, I would say that is the nub of it. Just think about problem A and problem B. And of course, nobody's trained in problem B. There aren't the budgets for training, and actually nobody's really done that properly anyway.
I often feel though it's a lot to do, particularly with agencies. I've met many around the world and still working with many around the world. Sometimes, as the old saying goes, this fish stinks from the head downwards.
Yes, exactly. It does.
You know, everybody thinks that they've got to be that arrogant, flashy CEO.
Well, the last thing actually I would ever want to deal with, if I'm a client of anybody, is an arrogant, flashy CEO. Give me somebody that I really believe in. Give me somebody who's authentic and is telling me the truth. Give me somebody that I really feel has got my back and is on my side and is working on my behalf, even when I'm not there. Now, that's the person I want to do business with. That's the person that really I'm going to open my problems to. And that's the problem. That's the person that is going to get more of my attention and more of my funds and more work.
Yeah.
Because they've got my back, and
Mm.
that is important.
Yeah.
So that's for me, that's the real nub of the issue.
Yes, without a doubt. Paul, before we move to part two, I'd like to remind viewers and listeners of your website URL, which is very simple. And it's all the W's, listeners. I'm going to spell it out for listeners, by the way. Viewers, you can see it on the screen behind me. All the W's, paulcowan.com. But for listeners, I'll spell that out, Paul, P-A-U-L, and Cowan is C-O-W-A-N, paulcowan.com. And here's the details of your book again. It's called Connecting Clients for Stronger, More Rewarding, and Longer Lasting Client Relationships, published by Harriman House. Paul, I must be enjoying it as I keep vigorously nodding my head, especially at your top tips at the end of each chapter. I love that bit on the egogram, by the way. That's a good one, that. And I also love the comment on the front of this book from a reviewer. It says, "Do you have the confidence not to buy this book?" Go on, Paul, give them a challenge. It's time for part two. Unless you are totally arrogant or ignorant, as I have found, nobody likes to lose a client. And I'm sure agencies must make efforts to solve a relationship problem. But what mistakes do they make in trying to do so? And I must stress here that this is not just advertising or marketing agencies, but professional services as well that make these relationship mending errors. What are those key mistakes, Paul?
Well, I think the key mistake, firstly, just to reprise on part one, focusing on the relationship problem is probably the most important, and the problem B in that context. I mean, it's a bit like dealing with couples as well. Both clients and agencies, or any kind of supplier-client relationship or couple, will show up and demonstrate their arguments. And couples particularly come into my consulting room, and they have a very practiced dance of the argument, and it's all about who didn't do this or who didn't do that, or something happened then. And actually, that's not the real argument. The fact that he didn't put the garbage out, or she didn't do this, is absolutely neither here nor there, because there's something else going on, and it is always up in the or down in the problem B area. So problem A focus is not going to resolve it. It's actually that fundamental area. So in terms of what can be done about this, I think the most important thing is, rather than spin into action, is really to get very clear about the diagnostics and to step back from a relationship. And that can be very difficult, whether it's a personal relationship or a business relationship. And in the book, by the way, I invite people to use diagnostic inquiry, which is really a very simple way of finding out what's going on for a client. It can be used in personal circumstances too. And it's a very simple technique, and I would say it's a good start point for how to do things well. And making a map of the other person's world is unquestionably the best thing to do before starting any reparation. And the way to do that is with your client, and try the client first, because it's a lot easier than trying with your spouse, is to find out, well, what really is going on, because we often project, oh, they're thinking that. Well, my wife's a psychotherapist. I've been married 8 years, and neither of us know what the other's thinking, and we're psychotherapists, right? You just cannot know the world of another person that well. So start off by thinking, well, I don't know that person, and then ask them about their experience of the agency. So if I was an account man, I'd say to my client, tell me your experience of us. And most clients really don't get asked that question a lot, so they might sort of stumble. And I would say, okay, so just repeat it. And if they say, well, what do you mean? I'd say it again. And I would pause and give silence. And I would not fill the silence. I would allow their thoughts to fill the silence. And then they will start telling me their experience. Now, I'm not going to ask about strategy or about implementation, because actually I'm guiding them. If I do that, I
Yeah.
want to know what their experience is.
Mm.
And I'm going to record all the points that they make very, very carefully in my mind. I might tape it as well with their permission. But then I'm going to pay attention to what is not said, because often what is not said is way more powerful than what is said. And I'm going to register all of that very, very carefully. And now I'm going to inquire in a detailed way about each of those different areas and what the impact was on them. So if it was that, if I was running an agency these days, we had missed a deadline, I'd say, okay, so tell me about what happened. Oh, right. So you didn't make the presentation to the group board, and you didn't make your bonus, and you didn't get your budget allocation. Right. This has got a big significance, right? So now I know what's gone wrong and how significant it is. And now I can do something about it in terms of reparation, or something else might not have been significant at all. That process, by the way, can take literally 10, 12 minutes. It's a bit like going to a doctor. If you say to a doctor, I've got a sore arm, they won't give you some pills. They'll say, well, how long has it been going on, whereabouts, etc., what happened just before. Same process. Now, in terms of getting it right, then repairing the damage, understanding, very clear understanding. And then even if you know the answer, I would say, don't say, oh, we can fix that in the meeting. I would personally say to my client, you've given me some really important things to think about here. I'm going to go away and I'm going to come back in a week's time with some recommendations. Now, the reason I do that is so the client really believes that I'm going to give it some thought. And I will do, by the way. I will reflect further.
Yeah.
And then I will go back and make a very serious laying out of what we can do. So I think that that's by way of reparation. Now, in terms of listening to the client, it's really difficult. Nobody's been trained to listen. And I thought I could listen until I started to train to become a psychotherapist. Then I realized, oh my God, I do not listen. And recording conversations, clearly, of course, with this full disclosure, that's happening, and then playing them back, you will find out just how many of the issues you've introduced, or in my case, I've introduced in error, because it's my stuff, not the client stuff. So being very careful about listening to the clients, I think that's a way of making reparation. And then, in the book, I talk about an algorithm for understanding client-agency relationships. And there is an algorithm, and it's the first one that's ever been put together. And it's, by the way, it's proven. Got enough research to be able to say it's proven. And client agency or any supplier relationships are very complex. If we think couple relationships are complex, and they are if you're trying to solve them. But client relationships, wow, they are so many different influences, so many different forces, which have got nothing to do with problem A, by the way, the task at hand.
Yeah.
What's going on for people. So really being very careful about listening to each person and understanding is crucial. Now, for clients, getting feedback or giving feedback is a challenge, and recognizing that as a challenge. We're all socialized not to tell the truth, right from an early age.
Yeah.
Don't tell granny she's growing whiskers on her chin or whatever it is. Don't tell grandpa he smells.
Yeah.
And we're socialized not to express ourselves fully. Now, as we grow older, we realize that to get along, we have to kind of suppress some of the natural stuff we feel about people. And once we start working in an organization, there's also stuff we don't want to disclose to other people, because that's part of our corporate objectives. Now, once you've been working for a couple of years, after a whole, youth spent being slightly suppressed in what you say in public, and now you're in an organization where you've got to be tight-lipped about whatever's confidential, it becomes very difficult for clients to be open, honest, and direct with their agencies or with any of their suppliers.
Yeah.
So the moment you start asking for feedback, now there's a real challenge. So what I put out in the book is actually, look, there's a way of doing this. So it doesn't matter if somebody hasn't been trained. you can still get fantastic feedback.
Mm,
And the way is a technique called feed forward. And it really asks for positive orientated questions. And that allows anybody to be able to give to somebody else a very clear understanding of what it is that they have in their mind when they look at a recommendation or a piece of work, uh, or anything, or
mm,
anything.
yeah.
Uh, and I think that that is fundamentally important, and I could go on and on and on, but I mean, just on the,
There's so much.
yeah.
And listen, I don't want you to keep going on and on, Paul, because I need you to come back again as a guest, because I've got to keep going on and on and on, haven't I? Now for part three, I'm sure that the competitors of agencies would love for others to keep breaking relationships, but that's expensive. Pitches are hard won and costly. I'm doing an interview soon about pitching in Los Angeles with the movie people. Yeah, that's a tough world. What should agencies be doing now to ensure that they minimize the risk of relationship breakdown with existing and future clients? Is top-down change needed, for example? What should be on an agency's action list? Oh, and how does your book help them in this action?
Well, I think it's really simple. Go back to problem A and problem B. Focus
Mm,
at least 10% of their time on problem B, the relationship. I know things are tighter now than they've ever been. There's fewer people, margins are tighter,
mm,
but focusing on problem B, how are we getting on? What's the relationship doing? Spending money to find out how it's going on. So using um, organizations such as ourselves, that's a good way of doing that on a regular basis, and training and training and training and paying attention in every respect, and making sure the people that they recruit are very good relationally.
yeah,
I think those are the really important things, And can the book help? Well, absolutely. There are, it's a page of 300 plus pages, with, I don't know, 40 to 50 different ideas. And I guarantee that any marketing agency, in fact, any business that is in the professional services, they buy one for every client-facing person, one book for every client-facing person. Within a year, probably within 6 months, they're going to get that money back, and they will get
mm,
it back consistently year after year after year. It's a very low-cost investment for a masterclass in client relationships.
yeah. And do you know what really puzzles me, Paul, is why people haven't bought, they've obviously going to buy this book now, but why they haven't made the effort to reduce the supply, the loss of relationships, because, it costs a lot of money to pitch to win a contract, doesn't it? It's a huge amount of money that's in many cases then frittered or lost away.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is that optimism bias uh, is prevalent. Well, it's a human condition. We
Mm,
get up every day believing we're gonna live for another day, and that
yeah.
things are going to be better tomorrow. Well, most of us, I mean, other than people who are severely depressed. Um, uh, the optimism bias, or optimism, is there. Right now, people who work in professional services, and particularly closer to the media, have a very high level of optimism bias.
Mm-hmm.
And that tends to really cloud judgment, because the small gut feelings of, I'm not sure about whether this is right, that sort of intuitive knowing of, oh, there's a bit of a silence from that client, or a bit of a, well, we got it done. The work's great. They'll love us now because of the work, and they ignore what happened just beforehand. That might have been a relationship rupture. All of that gets put into the background. That's the function of optimism bias. It kind of pushes down those negative feelings, and that's very helpful. It gives us energy. It makes us get up in the morning and think, well, we'll do something different, and we will do something special today.
Mm.
But the problem is that is the mask. And the real challenge, I think, is then for agencies to have a healthy dose of skepticism. I think
Yeah.
that's the antidote.
Mm.
But that's not a natural tendency.
No, I
That is not a
understand.
natural
Yeah.
tendency.
Yeah.
So in a way, this book is a way of saying, here's a palatable way of becoming a bit more realistic about life. And here's some jolly interesting skills that you can try and have fun doing it.
Brilliant. Yeah. Clients usually want long-term relationships these days. That means their supplier or vendor can get to know their business needs and challenges much better, provide innovative solutions, and help the client achieve growth. It seems to me to be a simple formula, but one which is far too often not applied. Don't let that happen to you. Thank you, Paul Cowan, author of Connection with Clients, for an informative and insightful interview.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate it.